Thank you very much, Dean Powers, and welcome everyone, and especially our esteemed speaker today. We are especially lucky to have him here. We are sharing him with the National Endowment for Democracy, and I might say that you have to hold off on any use of social media, Twitter or whatever, until Tuesday evening, right, when he will have completed his talk at the National Endowment for Democracy. But we are especially grateful to have him sharing his time before he goes back, first to Germany, and then where he was in exile for 10 years, and then to his native Ethiopia. He served as president, as Dean Powers indicated, from 1995 to 2001. He was a member of the House of People's Representatives, the lower house, and most recently he was chair of a new party, a party that is in opposition to the ruling party, the United for Democracy and Justice. I like the combination of the justice and democracy, very important. He was also involved in earlier days as a student in opposition to the Walaga feudal system in the 70s. He advocated for the rights of the Oromo people. His dissertation concerned this group in a department of ethnography at the University of Frankfurt. One of the reasons why the topic today is so important is that Ethiopia has as many as 80 different ethnic and linguistic groups. And the challenge of governance in a multi-ethnic state is a worldwide challenge, but especially if one is also committed to a constitutional democracy. And the formation of that constitution, our speaker had an important role to play. There's probably no more important issue internationally today than the issue of authoritarianism in various guises versus democracy in various forms. We know that there is a popularity of a kind of competitive authoritarianism, a kind of electoral autocracy. At the same time, there are many democracies that are only democracies in form and language and not really in substance. So we hope to hear from our speaker today in his view of the constitutional challenges in building democracy in a multi-ethnic country. Dr. Gidada.
First of all, I would like to thank Dean William Powers for receiving me, and Professor Crocker, even coming up to Arlington to pick me up with students. Thank you very much, and for initiating this program that I come here and get introduced to you. And I'm also very much happy to meet everybody here, the students and professors, to be interested in Ethiopia and in what I say. Thank you very much for being here in a large number. So I am a slow speaker. I hope I will not take a lot of time because of that. And not only slow speaker, but when I explain, I have language problem, Oromo, Amharic, English, and German mixed, and to have the articulation, I have a little bit difficulty in that, but I will try to be short. Now, I would like to start with one point, that is the title, Constitution for Multi-Ethnic Democratic State Nation, Ethiopia. Yeah. I chose this title because Ethiopia is not a nation. It is not a nation state. I don't want to go into the terminology of defining what nation state and state nation is, but Ethiopia is a country of many nations, and it is a national country. It is called the federal, it's a federation of nations and is called Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. The 1995 Constitution tries to address the national question, the problem of how to have peaceful and happy living together of different peoples and have a state together. And the Constitution we made in 1995 tried to address this problem, this question. And my interest is that the Ethiopian state survives, that the Ethiopian people live together happily. When I was president, when the ambassadors and the other visitors, guests come to me, I used to describe Ethiopia like a vase of flower with different colors and so forth. And I love Ethiopia because of that. And we should keep this beauty of Ethiopia and under one state. And that's why I chose this title. When I present my ideas today, the overview of my discussion will be, first of all, concentrate on the national question in Ethiopia. Then I will speak about a little bit about the Ethiopian constitution, and the challenges we face, and then also the roadmap for reviewing and amending the constitution, which I believe should be done. And then finally, I will give some concluding remarks. So I would have liked to give more background information on Ethiopia, but because we don't have time, I will not go into that. Maybe if we have enough time, questions may come up where I try to answer your question of interest and so forth. Now, on the question of the national question, how did it appear in the Ethiopian politics? The origin of the national question in Ethiopia, some people blame the Ethiopian students' movement of the 1960s and the ruling party for introducing and propagating the national question into the Ethiopian politics. But for me, not because I participated in the Ethiopian students' movement in the 1960s, but for the fact is that the national question originated in the process of what was going on in the Horn of Africa at the end of 19th century, when European colonial powers were competing to take over different parts of Ethiopia. The French, for example, from Djibouti up to Senegal, and the British from Alexandria to Cape Town, and Italians, Germans, and the other colonial powers, Belgium, and were competing to scrambling for territories in the area. And so, at that time, it was the king of not the whole of Ethiopia, but part of Ethiopia, who expanded his territory and brought a lot of different ethnic groups under his control. And that was partly to defend his territory, that area, from the colonial expansion, but at the same time also compete with them, with the colonialists, but at the same time also maybe with their help also. The French helping him to compete against the British, and the British at the same time helping him to compete against the French, or the Italians against both of them. And so that is, for me, the, 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 the beginning of the national question. Then, after the formation, after Emperor Menelik expanded his territory and brought different peoples under his control, they followed the economic, political, and linguistic and cultural operation and exploitation. That is the beginning of the national question, to my belief. Then, what happened is, this triggered opposition to the rule, the feudal exploitation, and suppression of language and history and culture and so forth, that the resistance movements started, and several armed struggles started in the 1950s and the 1960s, mostly also influenced by the anti-colonial movements in Africa, particularly against Italy, in Libya, and Somalia. And so the different ethnic groups, particularly the Oromo and the Ogaden, or what we call Ethiopian Somali, also were influenced by these movements. And Eritrea was also influenced by the anti-colonial movements in Africa in general. And so the students' movement in the 1960s articulated what is going on in Ethiopia at that time. What kind of economic, social, and political problems are there, and how the solution should be. And the students' movement introduced the word national question. But actually, the students' movement was not concentrating on the ethnic or the national question only, but also on land question. The land was owned by the feudal lords. They were against feudal exploitation, and the students were also against the monarchy and wanted democracy. At the same time, demanded that the different nations or ethnic groups have their own self-determination. I participated in that struggle also. Yeah. So the situation was so that by 1974, the monarch, Emperor Haile Selassie, was no more in control and lost power. Particularly in 73, 74, you remember the famine of 1973, and also the oil crisis of 73, 74, where life was difficult, and there was popular uprising, what we call the Ethiopian Revolution, great revolution of February 74, where women, where the Muslims who felt oppressed, ethnic groups, teachers, students went to the street, so that the emperor had to change, change the prime minister, and ordered the new prime minister to prepare a new constitution. So by 1974, September 11, the military group took over, and ruled up to 1991. And during this time, what the military did was, first of all, privatize land and private property. They also introduced the socialism into the country, although it is according to different understanding whether it was really socialism or not, communism or not. That is a question, whether it is a nationalist movement. That's another question. But whatever the case, it introduced socialism, and then also the military government recognized that there are different ethnic groups and there is national question, and tried to introduce some reforms, for example, on the media and in some schools in literacy campaign using different languages for the different peoples and so forth. And but that did not help. War continued, and by 1991, the army and the military government were powerless and almost collapsed, so that in April 1991, the United States State Department and the British Foreign Office called for a conference in London, what we call the London Conference of April, which in which the representatives of the main opposition resistance group, the Eritrean and the Ethiopian, the Tigray movement, came and took part on the conference, where it was agreed to call a conference of different organizations to come together and discuss and decide on what kind of government would be established and when it should be established. And therefore, according to this agreement, in July 1991, a peace conference took place, and this peace conference decided for the establishment of a transitional government, and also called on the formulation of a constitution which is based on the charter or prepared by the parliament, by the peace conference, which is a basis, which became the basis of the 1995 constitution, particularly the self-determination question. So, after the July conference, then in August 1991, a transitional government was established, and it stayed in power until 1995. So, what happened during these five of rule of the transitional government? First of all, a transitional government was formed, in which the transitional parliament was organized, and the parliament decided to redefine the administration of the country. It was centralized, provinces, there were provinces, but it was decided to have a decentralized and restructuring of decentralization, which became the basis for the future, or what we have, the federal states today. And this was the federal states, or the regions, were organized according to the ethnic groups, which you see the shapes of the federal states is very funny a little bit to some people, but this is where different ethnic groups live, actually. And it was decided that each ethnic group has its own administration, where they have their own administration, they use their own language, and so forth. So this was what happened during the transition, and it was also during this transition that the Eritrean people decided in a referendum in 1993 to become independent of Ethiopia after fighting for independence for 30 years. And so, but for me, even if I participated in the process after 1991, after August 1991 establishment of the transition, my happiest and where I'm very proud of is that I participated in the constitution making. The parliament decided to establish a constitution drafting commission. After the commission drafted the constitution, it presented it to the transitional parliament, and the transitional parliament endorsed it, and this was presented to the Constitution Assembly, which sat in the end of November up to December 12 for 6 weeks and deliberated on the draft constitution, and that was also one of the proudest moments in my life, where we approved the constitution. And as you see, what happened is from more than 547 districts, representatives were elected and came and participated in the discussion for 6 weeks. And particularly when discussing the constitution, the Article 39, which decided on the right of self-determination of the different peoples of Ethiopia, not only self-administration, but the constitution guaranteed them that if they feel not to be part of Ethiopia, they can go as far as deciding to have their own independence, and so the right of nations to self-determination up to and including self-determination, independence was decided. And this is the basis of the constitution, where the people, when it was decided to approve this constitution, people rose up and started to dance. You see, the woman is from North Ethiopia, and the man dancing is from South Ethiopia. After these 104 articles were approved, then I gave the approved constitution to the then president of Ethiopia, then president, but later prime minister after 1995, who has passed away 2 years ago, Mallas, that his government establishes a permanent government. And that is the process of making the constitution. But we tried, although we tried to formulate a constitution to fit to the situation of Ethiopia, particularly building a state nation where different peoples live together while respecting their rights, but at the same time living together. But there are challenges to this. One of the challenges is it is very hard to keep 80 ethnic groups with 200 dialects to live together. It's very hard. So we tried to, even if we tried to formulate a constitution to solve this problem, still there are difficulties. And as you see, the main major ethnic groups are the Oromo, Amhara, Somali, Tigray, Sidama, and Walaita. And then there are more ethnic groups, which are in thousands only. And there is competition also among some of these. And not only competition, but also fear. Not forgetting also sometimes the grudges of the past, and that makes it very, very difficult that people to live together. Or when people move to other areas, from their own area to another area, then the people living there say, foreigners have come to our area, and therefore they should get out. And there is difficulty in such things. Then, although we, as I said, we recognized in the Constitution self-determination, there are still armed liberation movements. One of these is the Oromo Liberation Front, or also the Oromo Ogaden, or Somali, Ethiopian Somali Liberation Front. Then the Afar Liberation Organization. Even in Tigray, there is the so-called Tigray People's Democratic Movement. Then there is also the Amhara Liberation Front, which is formed recently. Then we have the Patriotic Front and Gimbot 7. These two are not actually ethnic based, but multi-ethnic. This is one of the challenges we face in Ethiopia. Then also, the national elite use ethnicity to mobilize their societies. This is also a big challenge. Then we have two international waters flowing out of Ethiopia, that is to the north, to Egypt, through Sudan, the Nile. Most of the water comes out of Ethiopia. And then also flowing to the southeast, the Wabi Shabelle, which flows through, from Ethiopia through Somalia. These rivers may be, could be developing into cause of war, and people, I mean, forces which want to destabilize Ethiopia because of these waters may support different armed movements and so forth. Then also there is the extractive economy, what I say. There is corruption. There is also patrimonial, or what is called neo-patrimonial economic exploitation. This exploitation may develop into social upheaval, and it may cause also political upheaval. And we have such kind of challenge. And then also we are poor country. We want to develop the country, but at the same time, we want also to have the right of the different ethnic groups to live in their tradition. I mean, we respect their traditional life and so forth. So the dilemma, what should we have? Should we have development where we go encroach because of a development into their living area or habitat, or leave this habitat for them not to develop the country. This is a very big challenge we are facing. Now, although these challenges are there, we tried, as I said, we tried to formulate a constitution which fits the situation. Now, but there are articles in the constitution which are also controversial, where there is no consensus between the public, opposition parties, and the government, the governing bodies. For example, the controversial or articles which are not yet in consensus is what, from the beginning, in the preamble, comes the terms nations, nationalities, and peoples. And there are people who ask, how come nations, nationalities, and peoples, while Ethiopia is a nation, there is one nation, there is one people, why should we have this terminology in the constitution? There are people who argue against this. Then there is also the question of the flag. The question of the flag is, it is believed the Ethiopian flag is the plain red, yellow, and green, red, and yellow, green, yellow, and red. But the monarchy had the Lion of Judah and the Star of David as a symbol or as an emblem. Then the military had a kind of symbol for representing farmers and workers. And then the present constitution decided for the last one. That is a kind of star, which is actually not the Star of David, but symbolizing the different ethnic groups to live together. So there is a big controversy on this question of flag. Why should different ethnic federal states have their own flags? Why not one flag only? Then there is also the question of language. There are people who argue there should be only one language throughout the country, but there are people who say, no, we have to preserve our languages. But there are also some ethnic groups or nations which demand that their language be also spoken at the federal level as working language. And this is one of the controversies we have. The biggest controversy is Article 39, which I mentioned earlier, about the right of nations to self-determination. Very controversial up to now. And personally, all these articles, actually, I struggled for. And I'm happy, and I'm proud that they are in the Constitution. But as citizen, I have to also see that others have the right to think other way. And the problem we have is there are two problems on the Constitution. That is the first question. The first problem was it was not, when we made the Constitution, it was not inclusive of different organizations. The big organizations, influential organizations, which existed at that time, which are now in exile, did not participate. The Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Front did not participate. The Oromo Liberation Front did not participate. And also the All Ethiopian Socialist Movement did not participate in the constitution making, in the process. Therefore, this was a weakness we had at that time. Then also, the other big problem is we didn't present the constitution to the public for a referendum to reject or approve it. What we did was establish the Constitution Drafting Commission, which prepared some talking points as for discussion, basis for discussion, that is principles which should be included in the Constitution. For example, should we have presidential system or parliamentary system? Should we have a federal system or, like in the old days, centralized one? Such things, or whether we have self-determination or allow self-determination or not. Such main principal questions were presented for discussion, and after the discussion, the results of the discussions were collected and put into articles of the Constitution, draft Constitution, and this draft Constitution was not, or even after the approval by the Constitution Assembly, was not presented in referendum to the people to decide in a referendum. These two problems, I think, are the main problems which are the challenges we have, which should be corrected by evaluating the Constitution, then have the Constitution draft amendment drafted so that it be presented to the people, so that we finally have, of course there will be some people who will be always against the Constitution, but if the majority of the people express that they accept the Constitution, then there is no problem. But until that is done, there will be a difficulty, and that is why I recommend that there should be an amendment. And of course, there are some points which I think should should be also implemented, which I feel are not implemented, are not respected. This has to be also seen. For example, Article 9, the supremacy of the Constitution. The Constitution says the Constitution is the supreme law of the country. Members of the government, workers in the institutions, political parties, and some members of the society don't respect this Article 9, the supremacy of the Constitution. This has to be also thought about. And then Articles 10, 11, and Chapter 3 speak very good points on human and democratic rights. But still, as Professor earlier expressed, we have autocratic, what did you say? Autocratic electoral. We have, for example, in May, going to have an election, yeah? This is actually nominal elections because the ruling party is a dominant. It says, it admits that it's a ruling party, like the party in Mexico, which ruled for 75 years, I think. Yeah, and also in Sweden, and also in Japan, there are parties which ruled for more than 50 years, and therefore, why not rule for more than 20 years? The party has been in power for 20 years now. And okay, I'm not opposed to that if the election is really fair, independent, and democratic. If the people really have the chance to decide properly on the Constitution, I mean, on the government, okay, then no problem. But the problem is that we have not free and fair and democratic election. And therefore, this has to be thought on. And then also the Constitution speaks of representation of minorities, yeah? But practically the question of representation of minorities at different levels, the local level, in the districts and communities, at the regional level or state level, states level, and then finally the federal level. The proper representation of minorities is not properly respected. These are some of the points which I think have to be discussed upon, and maybe a formulation of a new amended constitution, so that we have real practical situation where minorities are represented. So finally, what I would like to recommend, actually not to you, but to my Ethiopian friends, but the points I want to raise is that we, for example, we should have a constitutional court. That when we made the constitution, we made a mistake. We said, how can we give the right to interpret the constitution to individual judges? For example, the question of democracy and human rights, the question of national self-determination and so forth, how can we give the interpretation on that to individual judges? And we said it should be representatives of the different nationalities in the House of Federation, which should decide on that. But the problem is the House of Federation is dominated by the ruling party, yeah? And the ruling party interprets the constitution as it wishes, yeah? Let's say the present government party goes away, then another comes and also does the same thing. And therefore, it is better to have this system change, and we have a constitutional court where the constitutional disagreements are interpreted and solved and so forth. This is one a recommendation I make. And then we have, as I said, Article 9 is deciding on the supremacy of the Constitution. But when officials or citizens or leaders of parties violate the Constitution, who enforces the Constitution? I mean, who brings people to accountability and so forth? We don't have mechanisms in the Constitution to do that. Then the question of representation. We have the Westminster system of the majority Westminster system of majority representation. I think this does not fit for Ethiopia, where we have multinational society, and that should be also changed. This is one of the points I see in the Constitution. And then we have in the Constitution the question of representation, the question of inclusion, the question of transparency, the question of accountability is there, written on paper. But as I said, there is no mechanism to enforce that or bring people into accountability if they violate the Constitution. Of course, there are also recommendations by experts or for such a state like ours, for multinational state, to democratize it. And we have also good practices in this world from which we take, for example, India. We can learn a lot from India. We can learn a lot from Switzerland. We can learn a lot from Lebanon, and we can also learn from South Africa. I think the question of power sharing should come also. Then also I have difficulty to pronounce it, consociational democracy. Yeah, I think if we adopt part of this into our constitutional system, that will be very good. And after suggesting this, I think I come to conclude my presentation, in which I recommend that there should be time of a time of confidence building between the government, the people, and the parties. A time of confidence building that is up to beginning from now up to the next parliament, which will be in session after October 9, 2015. And we have election in 2020. We are too late in amending the constitution, but I think up to 2018 or 2020, if we work from now on, I think we will have a better constitution than which is there, and there should be a confidence building time where the parliament has its duty to do, work to do. The government itself also has duty to perform, and the parties, the media have work to do also. And I think this is what I recommend, that after October 2015, then the work of amending the constitution should start. And I hope the amendment question should begin by, first of all, having an all-inclusive conference, which should be called by the parliament, where it will be decided to have amendment prepared, and that amendment should be deliberated by the public, and then finally approved or disapproved by the public through referendum. This is what I believe, and here I'm sorry to have taken a lot of your time, and I hope we will have enough time to discuss a little bit, and thank you very much for listening to me. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much for laying out the challenges, the history, and your own role in forming the Constitution and the roadmap from now until May. And then our students will come in June and can help celebrate the results, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So now we have opportunity for comments, questions from the floor. Dorota.
My name is Dorothy. My name is Dorothy. I'm a second semester student here. I'm from India. My question is about the current situation in Ethiopia as far related to freedom of speech and expression. I was reading a few papers a couple of months back about the Universal Periodic Review of Ethiopia in the 13th session of the Human Rights Council last year. And there are concerns about the use of the anti-terror law to kind of curb on the freedom of expression of human rights defenders, civil society organizations. How do you see that as a challenge towards genuine democracy in the country?
So the question is the issue of freedom of speech, especially in the context in which the anti-terrorism law has been used to keep journalists and activists under surveillance and also imprisoned and repressed in various ways.
Good question. You see, I didn't go into details of the laws which were made after 2005. You see, after the 2005 election, where the ruling party almost lost, and to secure its power, it used violence against the public, and more than 200 people were killed on the streets of Addis Ababa. And after that, the parliament, which is dominated by the ruling party members, made 5 laws. One is the party's law, which limits the parties and forbids the parties to cooperate with foreign parties or do not take support from others except Ethiopian nationals and so forth. So the limitation on the parties is one of the problems we have. Then the civic society law, which also forbids that the civic organizations participate in advocacy work. For example, advocacy work for women's rights, advocacy work for children's rights, advocacy work on human rights, and so forth. This is impossible these days after this law. That is not only that, but also the civic organizations cannot get support from outside. Then comes the media law. The media law, which affects points out to your question. The media law says that the journalists should censor themselves, should not criticize the government, and if they criticize the government, then there will be a problem. And particularly, the Constitution says I can write on any media, whether it is social media or other medias, print medias, and also articles for electronic media. But if this is done, and if it is criticizing the government, then there will be a problem, the journalists and so forth. And particularly going with the media law, then comes the anti-terrorism law, which is very, very hard. If I have to be careful here while I'm here, if I meet and discuss with a leader of an opposition party, for example, Gimbot 7 or Patriotic Front, which or the Oromo Liberation Front, which are declared as terrorists in the country, yeah. If I meet them and discuss with them, I am in problem. I will be considered as cooperating with terrorists and so forth. And we have the public relations chairman of the party in which I was. Is now already 3 years in prison. Why? Because he asked about his brother, who is in Eritrea, fighting against the Ethiopian government in the Gimbot 7. He was this colleague of mine was just asking a friend who knew about his brother, whether his brother was alive or not. That's all. And this was considered to be communicating with a terrorist organization. He's in prison. Yeah. So this is the situation. I mean, yeah.
Roberto.
Hi, Roberto Esteves, also public policy master student. Thank you very much for all your insight. Following up on the previous question, I was going to ask what you thought was the biggest challenge to actually get to amending the constitution. I am guessing the ruling party is the biggest challenge, but I wanted to know what was your insight on what can be done from the opposition or from civic society to get through these challenges, and what do you think could be done to actually get to the process of amending the constitution? Thank you.
So the question is, given the ruling party's role in the government and in the society, what steps do you think are going to be appropriate to get the changes in the Constitution that you aspire to?
Yeah, I know that it's very hard for incentive to see incentive from the ruling party on the amendment of the Constitution. And as I said, advocacy work is very hard by civil societies, I know, but call on the public to say something on this, and also during the election now, the campaign by the opposition parties, at least those who are participating in the election, should use the question of amendment of the Constitution in their campaigns, which begins, I think, this week up to May 15th. I think through these campaigns, they can raise the question of amending the Constitution, and I'm sure even if the ruling party is not going to lose, that's my belief, because of different situations, not only because of the difficulties which are made by the government, but also the weakness of the parties, division among them, but still not maybe like 2010, where the ruling party gets 99.6 seats in the parliament. I think some opposition members will get into the parliament, and they can push forward the question of amending. And the international public, which also supports the government, including the United States government, they have also a role to play, I think.
Yes, voice from South Africa.
Yeah, my name's Derek Boyd. Looking at the political developments in Ethiopia over the last 20 years, it's very hard to see how the constitution played any significant role in the way the country was governed. And so I wonder whether, in fact, an effort to amend this constitution has any hope of really affecting the future of governance in Ethiopia. Do you have any comments on that position that I've outlined?
So the question is, given over the last 20 years that the constitutional provisions have failed to have much of an impact, why should you believe that things might be different in the future should your efforts be placed somewhere else, drawing out an implication? So the emphasis on amendments, would it be ineffective in making the changes that you seek?
Yeah, I know the Constitution is not a panacea for change. Implementation demands that, first of all, goodwill of different forces to respect the Constitution and improve the Constitution. Yeah, I know that. And the question is, I think there should be a guideline. And as long as the system is there, that is what I mentioned earlier, not only the problem of the ruling party as such, but also in 1994, when we made, or before that, when we formulated the Constitution, when we drafted the Constitution, one thing we didn't realize is the majoritarian system, where the ruling, the party which gets the majority of the seats in the parliament can decide whatever it does, whatever it wishes. Several times the ruling party is asked why it does some things or brings out laws. It claims that it is elected by the majority of the people and can't do whatever it wants. This is why I say the proportional representation system maybe is better to have than the majoritarian system. And as long as this is not done, any party which comes to wins the seats in the parliament, whether this party or another party will do the same thing. And that is why with a goodwill, with commitment, and with change of this electoral system, maybe some kind of change will come. Yeah, but if you have a party which is autocratic, what can you do except? And I'm not going to propagate for violent change of government. I don't want to concentrate on that. There were times when I supported that, but I think our people are tired of war, tired of armed struggle, and I don't think that will help.
Powers.
Is there a way for the United States to support the Ethiopian people in these efforts, or is it best for the United States to stay low in all this?
You see, the State Department every year brings out big volume of human rights reports. And most of the reports on human rights violation, democratic right violation, specific points which I never knew, I find it also in there. I think the State Department and the government know what the situation is. But the question is, you see the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean, which is way for international trade transportation, near to the oil sources of the Middle East. and also the present situation, the religious problems around Somalia, the Mogadishu Al-Shabaab. I think there is a dilemma. Protection of interest, where Ethiopia is part of the so-called transition of coalition of the willing to fight against terrorism, where Ethiopia sends its soldiers to Somalia to fight against Al-Shabaab, and also that there should be, according to the belief of some, there should be a strong government which keeps Ethiopia together, because Ethiopia is the biggest area in that, biggest country in that Horn of Africa, with more than 90 million population. And as I said, 80 ethnic groups. If there is disturbance in that area, then the whole of Horn of Africa is disturbed, and the Red Sea is going to be a problematic area. And I think that is why the United States government and other Western countries rather choose the so-called silent diplomacy. That is, when they meet the officials, maybe they raise some questions, recommend what should be done, but the government also knows that the United States is interested in such things. And if the United States insists on change or boycott support, then the government says, go to hell. Yeah, we have heard that over and over again. Nowadays, for economic development, there is China, there is India, there is Turkey, there is Mexico, there is Brazil, very active today in that area. And so it's no more that the government depends only on the West. Other opportunities are coming up, and that is the dilemma in which we are. So I don't know if I've answered. Yeah.
One of the points of our new dean, Robert Orr, is precisely that our new world is a multipolar world, and lots of opportunities that no longer are connected with the United States for change. We're almost out of time. I'd like to collect two questions, Shimi and Anna. Shimi.
I'm Shimi. I'm also a public policy student here. I just wanted to ask, you mentioned a little bit about population within the country is very tired of war, and I was wondering whether you find a difference between people who are within the diaspora outside of the country and their politics versus the politics within the country. That's what I was interested in knowing.
So given your point about the people in the country being tired of war, do you see a difference between the Ethiopians who are in the diaspora outside the country and those that are in the country?
See, I lived in Germany 17 years, and I was in the opposition, supporting the opposition. And every year, I used to say, next year, we are in power. We are going to win. 17 years long. And I'm sorry, my brothers and sisters in the diaspora, I think, have the same attitude still. can cry from here, go to the streets. I don't think that will bring any change. Yeah. And it is also wrong for me that the diaspora wants to decide on what the opposition parties in the countryside, who bear all the problems. I think the diaspora should not decide for them. Yeah, they are the ones who should find ways of resisting. Of course, the opposition parties in the country need some kind of moral support and material and financial support. More than that, nothing. And that's my belief. That's all.
And a very short question and a short answer.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. My question is very simple. How do you measure people's opinion in Ethiopia? Because you said that you have about 80 different ethnic groups. I would think that they have different views on what the government is supposed to be. And I would also imagine that you don't have things as reliable opinion polls, given that the media is constrained. So how do you know what people want?
Yeah, we don't have a polling system. People have difficulty to come to the media and use the media. And we don't have private television, for example. The source of other attitude, other ideas in Ethiopia is for those rich people in the towns, satellite televisions and so forth. Many people follow Al Jazeera, for example. Yeah, but those are those rich people who can buy television, satellite. Also, there is one channel, Ethiopian satellite television. It gives an alternative information, but sometimes exaggerated. That's my feeling. I watch it because I have a dish. Yeah, sometimes of exaggeration, but still alternative media, but not the public. Then at least now the people are beginning to buy mobile telephones. Yeah. I'm very happy that I see farmers plowing with one hand, at the same time talking about the market for grain with their mobile. I'm very happy. I hope they will slowly start to use their mobiles for social media and so forth. I hope so. You see, how do I know the feeling of the people? You see, I go to the street, talk with the bistros, for example, or at prayer meetings. People speak what the problem is. Sometimes nowadays also in the taxis, you can hear people complaining what is happening, and that's how you tell if the people are satisfied or dissatisfied. The problem is the dissatisfaction is there, but taking steps, showing resistance and opposition. That's very difficult. But since before I left in 2013, before I decided to be non-partisan politician, my party started to demonstrate, and on the demonstrations, people have started to be daring to come to the street also. Although there are a lot of difficulties on that also. Yeah. So
Well, thank you very much. You've given us something of the history, something of the aspirations, the challenges, and brutal honesty about the difficulties, but also, I think, some basis for keeping hope alive. And for that, the School of Public Policy, the faculty, staff, and students, thanks you very much. We have to keep hope alive, too.
yeah.
And a small token of our appreciation,
Okay.
now you're a Maryland Terp,
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
which is not a very fast animal,
Yeah.
but is slow and accomplishes a lot in the long run, right?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.